The H1B Guy here, and today, the H1B Guy news for the week ending August 7th, 2020. But before we get started, I wanted to ask you if you would please go ahead and subscribe to the H1B Guy channel. Really goes a long way in helping me and the channel to continue to produce content like this. I just want to say that the events that unfolded on Wednesday on the Senate floor involving S386 were quite intriguing. Literally must watch TV. I'm sure it left some of you confused while others rejoiced. There is no doubt there's a division on this Senate bill and the overall opinion of the H1B visa. I was personally left speechless. It was like a WWE match where there was a heel that came out from under the ring to interfere and have the match disqualified. That's literally the best analogy I can draw to make sense of it all. So please check back here Monday for coverage on why Senator Rick Scott objected to S386 based on the failure to include the Rosetta Stone Amendment at the very last second. And now the news. July 31st, 2020. In an article written by Genevieve Douglas titled U.S. Labor Immigration Agencies Team Up on H-1B Enforcement. Quote, fraud investigations into the H-1B Specialty Occupation Visa Program will now be a joint effort by the Federal Departments of Labor and Homeland Security, which will share data and records on guest workers under a new agreement announced Friday. It's a source of information the DOL has never previously assessed for enforcement purposes, the agency said in a statement. The DOL's greater involvement in investigating potential violations of the Immigration and Nationality Act's temporary visa program for high-skilled workers also represents the first time the agency's secretary has exercised this authority to personally initiate more robust examinations of employers' use of H-1B workers, it said. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services will, as part of its adjudication of petitions, refer suspected employer violations within the H-1B program to the DOL's Office of Foreign Labor Certification for administrative and targeted site visits. The agreement arose from President Donald Trump's June 22nd immigration proclamation suspending entry to certain temporary workers for visa holders to protect jobs in the country for U.S. workers through the rest of the year. The proclamation called on the Labor Secretary to make use of his enforcement power, and the agreement signed today will be central to the department's work carrying out the president's policy of ensuring that the use of foreign labor does not harm American workers, the DOL said in a statement. So last Friday is when Bloomberg broke news on the foreshadowing of what was looming late this past Monday in the executive order that was signed by President Trump and created the domino effect as we would see sort of transpire throughout the rest of the week. What a shocker. Two government agencies working in complete silos. Have we not learned those mistakes from other historical events that have transpired that are directly linked to government agencies not sharing information? This is the beginning of increased site visits and prevailing wage audits to verify LCAs are current. As we mentioned on the H1B Guy reads between the lines earlier this week, make sure your LCA is current, and that includes your home residence if you're working remotely. Mark my words, ICE is coming. August 4th, 2020. In an article that was shared with the H1B Guy on LinkedIn, we see Bloomberg, which has been very H1B friendly over the years, take a complete 180 with this opinion article written by Rachel Rosenthal titled, Tech Companies Want You to Believe America Has a Skills Gap, but what they really want is a steady supply of cheap, dependent IT workers. So this article is extremely long, like too long, really. I'm going to cover a lot of it, but not all of it in its entirety. If you want to read the entire article, it is behind a paywall, and the link will be in the description. Quote, weeks before she lost her job, Judy Konopka's desk was already clear. Gone were the photos and plants, the vintage typewriter, and illustrated calendar. The wall where she had once tacked up a printout of an inspirational quote was bare. By the time she walked into the brisk New England winter air on her last day, exiting the building where she had worked for the better part of 2 decades, Konopka didn't have so much as a box to load in her 2007 Pontiac Vibe. Konopka's departure from Northeast Utilities in 2014 wasn't billed as a layoff. Her employer's merger with a Massachusetts power company would eliminate 350 jobs through attrition, the chief executive officer said when the deal closed in 2012. For a while, the staff believed it. The tied up created a $12 billion company that eventually became Eversource Energy, with about 4 million customers across New England. Management gave reassurances that there would be more than enough work to go around after the deal. But group by group, over the course of several months, teams were being displaced. Konopka, a web designer, was one of about 200 information technology employees to be laid off. Several not only had to watch their jobs go to foreigners, but they also had to train their replacements. Many new hires were H-1B visa holders, mostly young, educated guest workers hired for specialty occupations, such as engineering or computer programming that requires at least a bachelor's degree. It's important to note that these areas of study and the occupations they may lead to tend to get jumbled in conversations about STEM, but distinctions are critical. Just as emerging markets can't be considered monolithic asset class, the STEM labor market is almost impossible to assess as a whole. At any given time, some fields will be doing well and others won't. To assess the skills gap, then, it makes sense to look at the sector where most H-1Bs are heading: technology. In fiscal 2019, two-thirds of approved H-1B petitions were for computer-related occupations, according to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Are these guest workers filling a dire shortage? The data suggests otherwise. In 2018, the U.S. had between 95,500 and 143,000 job openings in IT occupations that typically went to candidates with a bachelor's degree or higher in computer science or engineering, according to Hal Salzman, a professor for Rutgers University's Edward J. Bluestein School of Planning and Public Policy. American citizens and permanent residents earned about 100,000 degrees in computer science or related engineering fields. H-1Bs pay U.S. taxes, but receive few of the protections that American workers enjoy, namely unemployment insurance. The data can be hard to parse, but a large share of H-1Bs are eventually sponsored for permanent residency by companies, and a big portion of green card applications are for people on H-1B visas. In this way, H-1Bs have become an unfortunate prop in the narrative that the U.S. has an urgent, unmet economic need and its struggling educational and immigration systems can't fill. Deep-pocketed tech companies that lobby Washington on immigration are joined by universities and research institutions seeking to expand their STEM programs and attract foreign students willing to pay top dollar tuition, in part to get into the U.S. employment pipeline. For years, the steady flow of relatively cheap, ready-to-work H-1Bs has helped diminish incentives for many companies to invest in training and development. In 2011 op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, Capelli, the Wharton professor, wondered how businesses could complain of difficulties finding qualified candidates with unemployment hovering just below a post-recession high of 10%. He noted that blame gets passed around, schools are failing, immigration policy is insufficient, and Americans are lacking skills. But I believe the real culprits are the employers themselves, he wrote. Rather than shepherding exceptional talent into the U.S. and turning them into Americans, the H-1B system has given companies a steadily expanding supply of guest workers who are themselves stuck in indentured limbo. As Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia wrote in an opinion piece, The H-1B program was never intended to create a pool of foreign labor that displaces Americans' opportunities for good-paying jobs. End quote. I've heard this story so many times, literally just with different names and companies interchanged. Just look at some of the comments on this channel for examples. Now, I'm not saying it isn't true, but I don't believe it's common as you think it is. Judy's job was redundant. Period. The staffing cycle is the staffing cycle. Companies expand and contract. They will add contractors, then perm employees, then reduce contractors, then reduce perm employees, then add contractors. And the cycle continues over and over and over. The example given at the beginning of the article is from 2014. Now, I know earlier in the week we talked about data from 2010 to 2016, but as a reporter, I'd hope to find some more current sources than from 6 years ago, especially if I'm going against the grain of the news service which I'm reporting for. It's not just about the degree. It's about the skill, the development language, and the technology stack. Indian universities and their offshore incubator programs are putting their resources ahead of ours based on some very specific sectors within technology. They graduate, then they go immediately into the system. They gain experience, which is typically anywhere between 3 to 5 years in range, and then they begin seeking H-1B sponsorship path with whatever organization will sponsor them. Very interesting to see Bloomberg, who has generally been in support of the temporary foreign worker pipeline, publish this opinion piece. August 5th, 2020. News release from the Department of Labor. Headlined, U.S. Department of Labor and U.S. Department of Homeland Security enter into a memorandum of agreement. The U.S. Department of Labor today announced it has entered into a memorandum of agreement MOA with U.S. Department of Homeland Security, acting through the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS. Under this MOA, the departments will provide access and share information about immigrant and non-immigrant petition records and data contained within the Office of Foreign Labor Certifications, Labor Certification, and Labor Condition Application databases. Most critically, the MOA establishes processes by which USCIS will refer suspected employer violations within the H-1B program to the Department of Labor that USCIS identifies in the course of adjudicating petitions, a source of information never previously accessed by the department for enforcement purposes, and conducting administrative and targeted site visits. The enhanced collaboration and sources of information will be used by the Department of Labor in support of Secretary-certified investigations. The Secretary's power to personally initiate investigations of potential violations is a unique authority under the Immigration and Nationality Act that allows for more robust examinations of employers' use of H-1B workers than are ordinarily undertaken. No previous Secretary of Labor has ever exercised this authority. As part of his broader effort to protect the interests of American workers during the coronavirus public health emergency, President Trump directed the Secretary of Labor to make use of this important enforcement power in Presidential Proclamation 10,052. The MOA signed today will be central to the department's work carrying out the president's policy of ensuring that the use of foreign labor does not harm American workers. The MOA also sets procedures for the exchange of data as well as responsibilities regarding the use, retention, maintenance, dissemination, destruction, and safeguarding of data for information sharing is intended to support the administration's U.S. immigration law and combat fraud and abuse in the immigration system. Since the beginning of the pandemic, President Trump has taken steps to ensure that American workers are well positioned to return to work as jobs come back online, stated Secretary of Labor Eugene Scalia. The agreement signed today protects American workers by giving the Department of Labor an important new ability to launch investigations of potential fraud and abuse in the H-1B visa system. The MOA supersedes and replaces the MOA dated on January 12, 2017, and the corresponding 2019 addendum. It will be reviewed annually by both departments. The mission of the Department of Labor is to foster, promote, and develop the welfare of wage earners, job seekers, and retirees of the United States, improve working conditions, advance opportunities for profitable employment, and assure work-related benefits and rights. So this news release by the Department of Labor is really what we already knew based on the Bloomberg story that broke late last Friday. I did, however, find it very interesting to have the Department of Labor post this news release on the same day that Senate Bill 386 was on the floor. Coincidence? A Center for Immigration Studies response penned by David North posted on August 5th, 2020. And in the post written by David North for CIS.org titled Department of Labor and USCIS Move Forward on H1B Fraud Enforcement, quote, twice within a period of a few days, the administration has announced initiatives to rein in the once invincible H1B program for college grad foreign workers. In one of these moves, the president ordered that the government as an employer should give priority to U.S. citizens and green card holders over H-1Bs on the government's own payroll, as we previously reported. In the other, the Department of Labor, as a regulator, announced an agreement with the Department of Homeland Security that the latter would provide DOL with data on potentially suspect activities within the H-1B program that it had in its own files but had never shared with the DOL in the past. Of the two announcements, the first one got more attention and the president's signature, while the second one has much more potential to assist U.S. workers than the first. This is because there may be about 2,000 direct H-1B hires in the federal government, with something like 600,000 H-1B workers employed by the private sector and other levels of government that will now be subject to greater regulatory scrutiny. The arrangement is in the form of a memorandum of agreement signed by the two agencies and described in the DOL press release. I have no idea what a secretary certified investigation is, but I do know that there has been a large amount of information held by one agency, USCIS, a subset of DHS, that would be useful to another, but not shared with the other, in this case, the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Administration. This is all too typical of government, with too many single-minded silos in all policy areas and too little coordination. End quote. So here we see an opinion piece on CIS.org with a pretty significant jab at USCIS and the amount of information that they have withheld since their founding. Not surprising, as there have been so many missteps by the agency over the years. For more on how USCIS was founded, check out that video on the H1B Guy channel here. And last, we're going to finish up with a couple of Breibart articles. Breibart leans heavily on the ultra-conservative side with their views and articles, but I really like both of these enough to bring them up here today in the news and discuss them. August 5th, 2020, in an article written by Neil Munro for Breibart titled, Rick Scott blocks Mike Lee's S386 outsourcing bill, says Trump admin wants closer scrutiny. Quote, Senator Scott, Republican from Florida, stopped Senator Mike Lee's, Republican from Utah, S386 outsourcing bill just moments before it was about to pass through the Senate Wednesday, saying the Trump administration wants to assess any unwanted outcomes from the legislation. Scott objected to Lee's bill because it does not protect the inflow of Spanish-speaking migrants from Latin America into Florida. I've also spoken to the White House and agree we need more time to study the proposal and to understand its impacts on our immigration system, he added. All GOP senators had already given quiet approval to the outsourcing provisions in the bill pushed by Lee, which also includes a legislative backdoor allowing an unlimited inflow of foreign workers into the U.S. labor market, says a Hill source. Scott announced his Florida objection at 3 p.m. during the Senate's unanimous consent process, which usually allows minor bills to pass the Senate when no senator objects. The dramatic vote came the day after Trump restated his opposition to the H1B outsourcing business. We're finalizing H1B regulations so that no American worker is replaced ever again, he told several tech workers at the Tennessee Valley Authority, whose jobs were to be outsourced to companies that employ H1B workers. H1B should be used for top, highly paid talent to create American jobs, not as an inexpensive labor program to destroy American jobs, he said. The Lee bill is backed by U.S. investors and multinational Fortune 500 companies who stand to gain a massive flow of new Indian workers following the removal of the backlog. The S386 bill is also backed by India's government, whose economic strategy is built on the export of workers to the U.S., the export of workers to the United States, the United Kingdom, and other countries. As many of you who have watched this channel know, I'm assuming you were glued to your screen watching the Senate floor debate on S386 and already know how this unfolded. Just wanted to mention again, check back on Monday to this channel for more on Wednesday's Senate debate and surrounding the objection from Senator Scott and the proposal of the Rosetta Stone Amendment. And our final story for this week brings us another article from Neil Munro, and an article written by Neil Munro titled Ipsos Poll, Public Opposes Visa Workers by a 2-to-1 Margin. Quote, Americans oppose the inflow of foreign U.S. workers and seasonal workers by roughly 2-to-1 during the coronavirus epidemic and crash, according to a new study by highly ranked Ipsos polling firm. The strongest opposition in the NPR-funded poll came from women, of whom just 24% supported the continued inflow of foreign workers such as H1B and OPT graduates, H2B seasonal laborers, and J1 university workers. The poll is good news for President Donald Trump, who announced additional curbs August 3rd on the H1B program outsourcing. It is also bad news for business groups who failed to sneak a vast job outsourcing program through the Senate on August 5th. The July 30th and 31st poll of 1,115 adults asked, should the federal government restrict immigration to the U.S. during the coronavirus pandemic by doing each of the following? Banning the entry of foreign guest workers and seasonal workers into the U.S. The exclusion was supported by 58% of respondents, including 64% of people aged between 35 and 54, and 58% of people who earn between $50,000 and $100,000, and 56% of people in the Midwest. But the poll also showed large don't know responses, including 17% of women and 22% of voters aged 18 to 34. In comparison to most polls, which usually show rising support for migration among the wealthy, the Ipsos survey showed people who earn more than $100,000 annually have the strongest opposition of visa workers, 61%. This group also has the lowest don't know response of just 10%. The visa worker question was part of a larger poll that showed strong opposition to migration amid the pandemic. For example, 78% supported temporarily closing the U.S. border except for essential travel. Only 14% opposed the closing of the borders. 58% supported banning the entry of asylum seekers and refugees into the U.S. The poll showed 31% to 11% strong support for this statement. Quote, when jobs are scarce, employers should prioritize hiring people of this country over immigrants. The overall response for that question was 52% agree, 15% disagree, and 23% neither agree nor disagree. The poll reflects Americans' split attitudes towards migration. Progressives and conservatives hold strong ideological opinions, but a vast swath of non-ideological voters, including Hispanics, want to both welcome some legal immigrants and also force employers to hire all Americans first. The public split evenly on many questions, including there are enough immigrants in America already, and our government needs to pause further immigration. The U.S. should give priority to immigrants who speak English. Most immigrants to the United States do not easily assimilate into American society, but large percentages also dodge the questions, saying neither agree nor disagree to the questions, and also to the establishment's demand for more migration. I am not surprised by this poll at all. The picture being painted right now is that temporary foreign workers are stealing American jobs amidst a pandemic and probable economic recession. At a time when millions of Americans are unemployed, the rhetoric from this poll will only gain favor for the current administration in the upcoming election, which just so happens to be 88 days away as they continue their assault on the H-1B visa. In some cases, this may be true that Americans do feel this way, but you have to ask the question why. Is it patriotic nationalism? My experience has been real job loss occurs when American jobs are outsourced outside of the US. The average middle-aged American who lives in Kansas, for example, most likely has no idea what an H-1B visa is or how it works. H-1B visa holders come to the U.S. and pay taxes. They spend money in the form of necessary day-to-day needs and also for very lavish possessions, stimulating our economic growth. Guess when that doesn't happen? When jobs are outsourced. H-1B visa holders are not the enemy. They are critical to the success and growth of our economy. And so are the L1s for that matter. Wake up, people. And that's the news. As I mentioned, please check back on this channel for Monday as another episode of the H1B Guy responds. This time we'll attempt to answer why did Senator Scott object to 386? If you've made it to the end, I personally just want to thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I really just appreciate all the support and kind words I continue to receive from all of you. As always, please like this video, please subscribe to the H1B Guy, and click the bell for notifications. It helps me and the channel to keep putting out more content like this for you. The H1B Guy, your global source for all things H1B.